The air inside Le Jardin was thick with the scent of roasted duck, expensive perfume, and old money. It was the kind of restaurant where the lighting was kept intentionally dim, perhaps to hide the prices on the menu, or perhaps to obscure the hollow nature of the conversations happening at the tables. I sat at the head of the table, my back stiff against the velvet chair, feeling less like a guest and more like a wallet with a pulse. My name is Seraphine Vance. To the world, I am a 38-year-old forensic accountant with a reputation for hunting down hidden assets in messy divorces and corporate fraud cases. To the people sitting around me, my family, I was simply Sarah. The backup plan, the safety net, the one who fixed things when reality came crashing down on their delusions. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. My brother, Caleb, had turned 42 years old, and he was still chasing the next big thing like a teenager chasing a high score in a video game. This time, it was a tech startup. Before that, it was a craft brewery. Before that, a flipping business for houses he didn't know how to renovate. To Caleb, my father, Richard, bellowed, raising his glass of 1998 Cabernet Sauvignon. The dark red wine sloshed dangerously close to the rim. To the visionary of the Vance family! Finally, someone with the guts to grab the bull by the horns. My mother, Linda, clapped her hands together. Her diamond bracelets, which I knew she had bought on credit, jingled like wind chimes. "Oh, happy birthday, sweetie!" "I always knew you were destined for greatness. Didn't I tell you, Richard? He's special." "You did, Linda," my father agreed, beaming at his son with a look of adoration he had never, not once in 38 years, directed at me. "He's a lion." Caleb leaned back in his chair, soaking up the praise like a sponge. He adjusted the lapels of his suit, a suit I had paid for 3 years ago for a job interview he never showed up to. Beside him sat Jessica, his wife, who was currently more interested in finding the perfect filter for her Instagram photo of the lobster thermidor than in the conversation. I took a sip of my water. It was lukewarm. I hadn't ordered wine. I knew the bill was coming, and I knew who would be expected to pick it up. "The deal isn't closed yet, Dad," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the noise. "Maybe we should wait until the contracts are signed before we order the second bottle of $200 wine." The table went silent instantly. The warmth evaporated from the air. My father slowly lowered his glass. He turned his head to look at me, his eyes narrowing into slits. It was the look that said I had ruined the performance, the look that said I was the cloud blocking their sun. "Always the wet blanket, aren't you, Seraphine?" Richard sneered. His face was flushing a deep, angry red, a mix of alcohol and indignation. "Your brother is on the verge of making millions, Seraphine, and you're worried about a bar tab? This is why you're just an accountant." "You have no vision, no soul. You count beans while the men hunt." "I'm a forensic accountant, Dad," I corrected him, fighting the tremor in my hands. "I don't count beans. I find money that people like Caleb lose or steal." "Watch it," Caleb snapped, his smug grin vanishing. "Don't be jealous just because my company is going to be worth more in a month than you'll make in a lifetime." "It's not jealousy, Caleb," I said, feeling the old exhaustion settling in my bones. "It's math. You've borrowed $10,000 from me in the last 6 months for operating costs. You asked me to pay your mortgage last month. If this deal is so real, why am I still paying for your life?" My mother gasped, clutching her pearls. "Sarah!" "How dare you? On his birthday? You bring up money now?" "I bring it up because I'm the one paying for this dinner," I said, my voice rising slightly, "and the rent, and the mortgage on the house you and Dad live in. I bring it up because I'm tired." That was the trigger. My father slammed his hand down on the table. The silverware rattled against the fine china. A waiter paused nearby, looking uncomfortable, but my father didn't care. He loved an audience. "You think because you throw a few pennies our way, you own us?" Richard hissed, leaning over the table. "You think you're better than us because you have a steady salary and a boring, lonely life? Let me tell you something, little girl." He pointed a finger at my face. A thick, calloused finger that hadn't done a hard day's work in a decade. "Nobody needs you," he said. The words were precise. They were designed to maim. Nobody needs your money, and nobody needs you. Caleb's deal is done. We're going to be rich, filthy rich. And once that money hits the account next week, we won't need your charity. We won't even need to talk to you. I froze. The restaurant noise faded into a dull buzz. I looked at my mother. I waited for the defense. I waited for her to say, "Richard, stop. That's our daughter." Instead, she picked up her knife and cut into her steak, refusing to meet my eyes. "Your father is right, Sarah," she said casually. "You hold things over our heads. It's ugly. It's manipulative. We don't want you burning yourself out for nothing." "We don't need it anymore." Caleb laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "Yes, sis, you're obsolete. The ATM is out of order, and we found a better bank." "Nobody needs you," my father repeated, savoring the cruelty. "Go home to your empty apartment and your cats. We're celebrating the future, a future that doesn't involve begging you for scraps." I sat there for a moment, the words echoing in my skull. Nobody needs you. For decades, I had bought their love. I had paid for their mistakes. I had been the glue holding this dysfunction together. And now, at the first cent of imaginary money, they were discarding me like a used tissue. But in that moment of absolute humiliation, something strange happened. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. The crushing weight on my chest suddenly lifted, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. It was the feeling I got when I found the missing number in a ledger, the smoking gun in a fraud case. I realized I wasn't losing a family. I was shedding a parasite. I stood up. I picked up my purse. "Okay," I said softly. "I heard you, loud and clear." "Leaving?" Caleb taunted, raising his glass. "Don't forget the check on your way out." I looked at the waiter, who was hovering nervously. "Split the check," I said calmly. "I'll pay for my water and the garden salad. The rest, the gentleman in the suit has it covered. He's a millionaire, you know." I dropped a $20 bill on the table and turned my back on them. "Wait, Sarah!" My mother's voice turned shrill. "You can't just leave." "Caleb doesn't have his cards on him." "Nobody needs me, remember?" I said, walking away. "Enjoy the future." Before I tell you what happened next, because this dinner was just the spark that lit the fuse, I want to thank you for being here. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt used, please comment the city you're listening from below. It helps me feel less alone in this story. The rain hit my windshield like bullets as I merged onto the highway. The city lights smeared into long, blurry streaks of neon and gray. Inside the car, it was silent, save for the rhythmic thwack-thwack of the wipers and the pounding of my own heart. My phone started buzzing on the passenger seat. Mom, Dad, Caleb. I didn't answer. I reached over and flipped the phone face down. I drove without a destination in mind, letting the car eat up the miles. Driving had always been my escape, my therapy. But tonight, the road felt endless, a dark ribbon leading me back into my own memories. My mind drifted back, pulled by the gravity of the hurt I had just endured. I thought of my 16th birthday. I remembered coming downstairs, hoping for a car or maybe just a party. Instead, I found a list of chores and a note from my mother saying they had taken Caleb to a travel hockey tournament. "There's cake mix in the pantry if you want to make some," the note had said. I remembered sitting alone in the kitchen, mixing the batter, crying into the bowl. Then there was college. I worked 3 jobs to pay my tuition. Caleb? Dad took out a second mortgage on their old house to send him to a private university where he majored in social networking and dropped out after 2 years. "He needs the support, Sarah," my mother had said when I confronted her. "You're strong. You can handle yourself. Caleb, he's sensitive." Sensitive, that was their code word for entitled. But amidst the dark memories, one light shone through. Grandma Rose. I could almost smell her lavender perfume in the car. She was my mother's mother, but she was cut from a different cloth. While Linda was vain and flighty, Rose was steel and earth. She was the only one who saw me. I remembered the day she died, 10 years ago. I was sitting by her hospital bed, holding her hand. Her skin felt like dry paper. "Sarah Fine," she had whispered, her voice weak but her eyes fierce. "You have a good heart, but a good heart is a dangerous thing in this family." "I'll take care of them, Grandma," I had promised, tears streaming down my face. "I'll look after Mom and Dad." Rose had squeezed my hand, surprisingly hard. "No, you listen to me. Do not set yourself on fire to keep them warm. They will burn you to ash and complain that the smoke is bothering their eyes." She pulled me closer. "I'm leaving you something, a safety net, not for them, for you. Promise me you'll protect it. Promise me you'll keep the deed in your name." "I promise," I had sobbed. When the will was read, my parents were apoplectic. Rose had left me the bulk of her estate, a modest fortune, but enough to change a life. To Linda, she left her collection of porcelain dolls. To Caleb, a book on financial responsibility. The screaming match that followed lasted for weeks. "You manipulated her," my father had shouted. "You stole our inheritance." To keep the peace, to buy their love, I had used the money to buy the house on Oakwood Drive when their own home was foreclosed upon due to Dad's gambling debts. I put the house in a trust, the Rose Trust, with me as the sole trustee. I let them live there rent-free. I paid the property taxes. I paid the repairs. "We're doing this for family," I had told myself then. I thought it would make them love me. I thought it would make them grateful. But gratitude is a currency my family didn't understand. They viewed my generosity not as a gift, but as a tribute. A tax I owed them for the privilege of being related to them. "Nobody needs you." The words from the restaurant slammed back into my mind. I gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles turned white. They were right. They didn't need me. They needed a host, and I had been a willing host for too long. I took the exit toward my apartment. It was a modest place in a quiet complex. I could have afforded a mansion with my salary and investments, but I lived small so I could give big to them. As I pulled into my parking spot, the rain began to taper off. I sat in the dark car for a moment, looking up at my apartment window. It was dark. No one was waiting for me. Just my 2 cats, Barnaby and Jinx. But as I walked up the stairs, keys in hand, I felt a shift. The sadness was hardening. It was cooling into something brittle and sharp. I wasn't just the sad daughter anymore. I was the forensic accountant, and I had a feeling that tonight the numbers were finally going to stop adding up. I unlocked the door, unaware that the real horror wasn't what had been said at dinner. The real horror was waiting for me in a pile of mail on my kitchen counter. My apartment was silent, a stark contrast to the chaotic noise of the restaurant. I tossed my keys into the bowl by the door and walked into the kitchen. My hands were shaking, the adrenaline of the confrontation finally wearing off, leaving behind a cold, hollow ache. I saw the mail pile. I hadn't checked it in 2 days because I had been so busy preparing the audit defense for Caleb's imaginary company, another favor I was doing for free. On top of the stack was an envelope from First National Bank. It was stamped with red letters, urgent, delinquency notice. I frowned. I didn't bank with First National. I picked it up. It felt heavy, ominous. I tore it open, my fingers slicing against the paper. Dear Miss Vance, we are writing to inform you that your credit card account ending in 8892 is past due. The minimum payment of $450 was due on the 15th. Total outstanding balance, $14,200. The room spun. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. $14,000 on a card I didn't own? I ran to my home office. I didn't bother taking off my coat. I sat down at my desk, my sanctuary. This was my domain. I woke up my computer, the 3 monitors glowing to life, casting a blue pallor over the room. I logged into the National Credit Bureau monitoring service. I used this tool every day for work to investigate fraudsters, embezzlers, and cheating spouses. I had never thought to run a full forensic deep dive on myself. Why would I? I was responsible. I was the good one. The report loaded. I gasped, a sound that was ripped from my throat, raw and ugly. My credit score, usually a pristine 810, was flashing red. 620. No, I whispered. No, no, no. I scrolled down, my eyes scanning the data with professional speed, even as my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The list of recent inquiries was a bloodbath. First National Bank, credit card opened 3 months ago. Chase Sapphire, credit card opened 2 months ago. Vanguard Auto Finance, loan inquiry 4 days ago. Quick Cash Personal Loans, $50,000 disbursed 1 week ago. I clicked on the details. Every single account was opened using my social security number, my birth date, my mother's maiden name as the security question. And the address? 42 Oakwood Drive, my parents' house, the house I owned. I slumped back in my chair, the air leaving my lungs. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some hacker in a basement in Eastern Europe. It was them. I closed my eyes, and the pieces clicked together with sickening precision. The investment Caleb was bragging about, the capital he had raised, it wasn't from angel investors. It was me. It was a $50,000 loan taken out in my name. The dinner tonight, the vintage wine, the lobster, I paid for it. Not with the $20 I threw on the table, but with the credit card sitting in Caleb's wallet, embossed with my name. They hadn't just insulted me. They hadn't just told me I was unneeded. They had systematically stolen my identity, ruined my financial reputation, and committed federal crimes against me, all while smiling in my face and eating my food. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I thought I was going to be sick. I grabbed the trash can, dry heaving. The betrayal was physical. It was a knife in the gut, twisted by the people who were supposed to protect me. But then, the sickness passed, and in its place came the snap. It's hard to describe the snap. It's the moment when grief turns into strategy. It's the moment the crying stops and the planning begins. I sat up. I wiped my mouth. I looked at the screen. I was no longer Seraphine Vance, the daughter. I was Seraphine Vance, the lead forensic auditor, and I was looking at a crime scene. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Operation Eviction. I started digging. I pulled up the transaction histories for the fraudulent cards. Golf Galaxy, $2,400. Dad. Sephora, $800. Mom. DraftKings, $5,000. Caleb. Club Risque, $1,200. Caleb. They weren't even trying to hide it. They were drunk on their own arrogance. They thought I was so desperate for their love, so weak, that I would never check. Or maybe they planned to bankrupt me and then claim ignorance. I pulled up the security camera feed. I had installed a Nest system at the Oakwood house years ago for their safety. I had access to the living room camera. I clicked on the live feed. They were home. They must have just gotten back from the restaurant. They were in the living room. Caleb was pouring scotch, expensive scotch, bought with my money, into crystal glasses. Richard was laughing, his face red and sweaty. Linda was kicking off her heels. I turned up the volume. "Did you see her face?" Caleb mimicked, pitching his voice high. "I'm a forensic accountant, Dad. Yeah, right. She's a glorified calculator." Richard roared with laughter. The look on her face when I said, "Nobody needs her. Priceless. She's been lording that money over us for years." Little does she know she's funding the whole operation. "Do you think she'll notice the loan?" my mother asked, sipping her drink. "Her?" Caleb scoffed. "She's too busy working 60 hours a week to check her personal mail. By the time she figures it out, we'll have moved the assets into crypto and declared bankruptcy in her name. It's genius, Dad." "She deserves it," Richard said, his voice dropping to a growl. "She thinks she's better than us, buying this house, holding the deed. She treats us like tenants. Well, now the landlord is paying the rent." I watched them. I recorded them. I felt tears drying on my cheeks, leaving tight, salty tracks. "You're right, Dad," I whispered to the screen. "I am the landlord. And you have no idea what an eviction looks like when I'm in charge." I reached for my phone. I didn't call the police yet. That was too easy. I needed more. I needed to ensure that when I dropped the hammer, they could never, ever get up again. I needed allies. For the next 48 hours, I barely slept. My apartment transformed into a tactical command center. The floor was covered in stacks of paper, credit reports, bank statements, property deeds, and trust documents. I drank pot after pot of black coffee, my mind working at a fever pitch. I was building a case file that would make a district attorney salivate. Step 1 was documenting the fraud. I created a spreadsheet tracking every single unauthorized transaction. I matched them with geotagged social media posts. Transaction: $400 at the Ritz-Carlton Spa. Evidence: Instagram photo of Jessica and Mom in robes holding cucumbers, captioned #SpaDay, #blessed. It was almost too easy. Their stupidity was only matched by their greed. But to truly destroy them, to truly make sure they faced consequences, I needed to close the loop on Caleb's business. I needed to prove where the cash withdrawals were going. I traced the $50,000 loan. It went into a shell company account, Vance Global LLC. From there, $10,000 was withdrawn in cash. Another $15,000 was wired to an account in the Cayman Islands. This wasn't just fraud. It was money laundering. I needed inside information. I needed someone who knew Caleb's playbook. I thought of Brenda. Brenda was Caleb's ex-wife. They had been married for 5 years. My family had destroyed her. They painted her as a gold digger, a psycho, a liar. When they divorced, my mother told me that Brenda had tried to stab Caleb. I believed them. I cut her off. I blocked her number. Now, looking at the spreadsheet, I realized Brenda wasn't the villain. She was the prototype. She was the first victim. I found her number through an old mutual friend. My thumb hovered over the call button. Calling her was admitting I had been wrong for years. It was swallowing a pill of humble pie so large it might choke me. I pressed dial. It rang 4 times. "Hello?" Her voice was guarded, suspicious. "Brenda, it's Seraphine. Sarah Vance." Silence. A long, heavy silence. that stretched for eternity. "What do you want, Sarah?" she finally asked, her voice hard as flint. "If you're calling to tell me what a loser I am, your mother beat you to it 3 years ago." "No," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm calling to say, I think you were right. About everything." "Right about what?" "About them. About the lies. And I think they just stole my identity. They took out $500,000 in my name." There was a pause. Then a sound I didn't expect. A low, dry chuckle. "Welcome to the club, Sarah," she said. I wondered how long it would take them to cannibalize their own golden goose. "I need your help, Brenda," I pleaded. "I'm going to take them down, legally, financially, totally, but I need to know where Caleb hides the money." "Meet me," she said, "the diner on 4th Street. 1 hour. And Sarah, bring a notebook. You're going to need it." I grabbed my bag, stuffed the evidence folder inside, and ran out the door. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and bacon grease. Brenda was sitting in a corner booth. She looked older than I remembered. There were fine lines around her eyes, and her clothes were modest, worn. My family had left her with nothing. I slid into the booth. "Brenda?" She looked at me, assessing the dark circles under my eyes, the tension in my jaw. "You look like hell, Sarah." "I feel like it," I admitted. I slid the folder across the table. "This is what I found in 48 hours. Brenda opened it. She scanned the pages, nodding slowly. Classic Caleb. He did the same to me. Forged my signature on a second mortgage. That's why I left. It wasn't because I was crazy. It was because I was terrified of going to prison for his debts. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I should have listened." "It doesn't matter now," she said, closing the folder. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a small, battered black notebook. "When I left," she said, tapping the cover, "I took this. Caleb thinks he's a genius, but he writes everything down. Passwords, account numbers for his offshore betting accounts, names of the loan sharks he owes money to." My eyes widened. "He's not just a failed entrepreneur, Sarah," Brenda said, lowering her voice. "He's laundering money for a local bookie. Small time, but federal crime time. He uses the startup accounts to clean the cash." She pushed the notebook toward me. "You're the forensic accountant. You can connect the dots. Take it. Nail the bastards." I took the notebook. It felt heavy, like holding a grenade. "I'm not just going to nail them, Brenda," I said, a plan forming in my mind, cold and complete. "I'm going to bury them." After lunch, I drove straight to the office of Elias Thorne. Elias was the kind of lawyer other lawyers had nightmares about. He wore 3-piece suits, smiled like a shark, and charged $800 an hour. I laid everything out for him. The credit reports, the video footage, the deed to the house, Brenda's notebook. Elias read in silence for 20 minutes. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in his plush office. Finally, he took off his reading glasses. "Miss Vance," he said. "I usually advise clients to settle family disputes out of court. It's messy. It's emotional." He tapped the stack of papers. "But this isn't a dispute. This is an execution. Can we win?" "We can destroy them," Elias said. "We have fraud, larceny, forgery, wire fraud, and RICO implications. But these are your parents. Once we pull this trigger, there is no going back. Are you sure?" I thought of the dinner. I thought of my father laughing about my boring life. I thought of them spending my money on spa days while I worked late. "I'm sure, Elias," I said, "but I don't want to just sue them. I want to catch them. I want a confession." Elias smiled, showing too many teeth. "Then we need a trap. We need them to sign a document admitting to the debts, thinking they're getting more money." "I have an idea for that," I said. "They think I'm desperate for their approval. I'm going to offer them one last investment." The plan was simple, relying entirely on their greed and their absolute certainty that I was a fool. The next morning, I sat in my car, rehearsing my lines. I had to be the pitiful, desperate daughter one last time. I dialed my mother's number. "Hello?" She answered on the second ring, her voice clipped. "Mom," I said, letting a tremor enter my voice. "It's Sarah." "Oh," she said, "we were just talking about you. Your father is still very upset about your behavior at the restaurant." "I know, Mom, I know," I said, forcing myself to sound on the verge of tears. "I've been thinking about it all night. I was stressed from work. I didn't mean to be so unsupportive." "Well," she sighed, the sound of a saint forgiving a sinner, "we are willing to move past it. We're family, after all." "I want to make it up to you," I said. "I looked over Caleb's business plan, the one he sent me months ago. I think he's right. I think it could be huge." "Of course it is," she snapped. "We told you that." "I have a bond that just matured," I lied. "About $200,000. I want to invest it in Caleb's company, as a silent partner, to show Dad I believe in the family vision." The silence on the other end was heavy. I could practically hear her calculating. $200,000. It was a fortune to them. 200,000? Her voice dropped, becoming syrupy sweet. "Oh, Sarah, that would mean the world to your brother. It would really show your father that you're part of the team again." "But I need to do it properly," I added quickly. "For tax purposes, I need Caleb and Dad to sign some papers. Just standard waivers, acknowledging the investment structure. Can I come over for lunch tomorrow? I'll bring the check." "Yes," she said, almost shouting. "Yes, come over at noon. I'll make your favorite lasagna." "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." I hung up and immediately felt the urge to scrub my skin with steel wool. The manipulation was disgusting, but it was necessary. I spent the night with Elias drafting the documents. They looked like standard investment contracts. Thick, dense, full of confusing legal jargon about equity distribution and limited liability. But buried in the middle, hidden in plain sight, were two critical clauses. Clause 14B, the undersigned acknowledges that all recent credit lines opened under the name Seraphine Vance, ending in list of stolen card numbers, were authorized and utilized solely for the benefit of the undersigned, and the undersigned accept full personal liability for all debts incurred. Clause 15C, the undersigned acknowledges that their residency at 42 Oakwood Drive is at the sole discretion of the trustee, Seraphine Vance, and waives all rights to tenant protections, agreeing to immediate eviction upon request due to breach of trust. It was a confession and a suicide note, wrapped in the promise of free money. "They won't read it," Elias assured me, sipping his scotch. "Greedy people never read the fine print. They only look for the dollar signs." "I know," I said. "They think I'm stupid. They think I'm the bean counter who doesn't understand business. They'll sign." That night, I packed a bag, not for a trip, but for the raid. I put the hidden cameras in my purse. I put a high-quality voice recorder in my jacket pocket. I looked at the picture of Grandma Rose on my nightstand. "Tomorrow, Grandma," I whispered. "Tomorrow, we take the house back." I arrived at 42 Oakwood Drive the next day at 11:55 a.m. The driveway was occupied by a shiny new BMW X5, black, tinted windows, oversized rims. It still had the temporary dealer tags. I parked my 10-year-old sedan behind it. My hands gripped the wheel. My credit score had died for that car. I walked to the front door. The smell of lasagna wafted out. Garlic, tomato, and cheese. It was the smell of my childhood, weaponized. "Sarah!" Caleb opened the door, arms wide, grinning like a shark. He was wearing a new suit. "Good to see you, sis. Come in, come in." "Hi, Caleb." I managed a weak smile. I patted my oversized tote bag. I brought the paperwork and the check. Let's eat first, Mom insisted, ushering me into the dining room. We're a family, business later. Lunch was excruciating. I had to sit there and listen to them fantasize out how they would spend the profits. They talked about a vacation to Bora Bora. They talked about upgrading the kitchen countertops to marble. You know, Sarah, my father said, chewing with his mouth open, I'm glad you came to your senses. You were starting to sound bitter. A woman your age, bitterness makes you ugly. This investment, it's good for your soul. I agree, Dad, I said, clutching my water glass until my fingers cramped. It's going to change everything. So, Caleb wiped his mouth with a napkin. Show me the money. I cleared the table and laid out the stack of documents. It was about 50 pages thick. Okay, I said, putting on my best, boring accountant voice. Since this is a large sum, I need to make sure everything is compliant with the IRS. It's mostly boilerplate stuff, acknowledgement of risk, asset allocation, blah, blah, blah. I placed the check, a cashier's check for $200,000 that I had printed off a template. It was void, a prop, face down on the table under my hand. Sign the papers and the check is yours, I said. Caleb reached for a pen. Shouldn't we read it? Jessica asked from the corner. She was looking at me with suspicion. She was the only one smart enough to be paranoid. My heart stopped. Jessica, Caleb slapped. It's standard stuff. Sarah wrote it. She's boring, remember? She's not trying to screw us. She's trying to buy her way back into the club. He looked at me with a smirk. Right, sis? I just want to help, I said softly. I just want to be needed. See? Caleb flipped to the last page. Wait, I said, my heart pounding in my throat. You need to initial these pages too. Here. And here. And here. I guided his hand to Clause 14B and Clause 15C. What's this one about credit lines? Caleb asked, squinting at the bold text of the confession clause. Time froze. Oh, that, I said, thinking fast. That's just to consolidate the business expenses you've already incurred, you know, the startup costs, so I can write them off against the investment tax-wise. It basically says the money you spent is part of the company's valuation. It saves you taxes. Nice, Caleb said, his eyes lighting up at the word taxes. Smart. He signed. He initialed. Richard signed. Linda signed as a witness. They signed their confessions. They signed the eviction waiver. I pulled the papers back and slid them into my bag, my hands trembling. Okay, I said. Here you go. I handed Caleb the check. He looked at it. His eyes bulged. 200 grand, baby, we are rich. He hugged Mom. Dad shook his hand. They were cheering, high-fiving. When can I deposit this? Caleb asked. Give it 24 hours for the bond to clear on my end. I lied. Deposit it Monday morning. Perfect, Richard said. We're having a neighborhood barbecue tomorrow, a success party. You should come, Sarah. You can serve drinks. He laughed. He actually laughed. I'll be there, I said, standing up. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I walked out of that house with the evidence that would send them to prison tucked safely under my arm. As I passed the BMW, I ran my hand along the cold metal of the hood. Enjoy it while it lasts, I whispered. I drove straight to Elias's office. We scanned the documents immediately. We backed up the audio recording where Caleb admitted the credit lines were business expenses. This is it, Elias said, looking at the signed confession. We have them dead to rights. Not yet, I said. They're having a party tomorrow, a success party. They've invited the whole neighborhood, the homeowners association president, the golf club buddies, everyone they try to impress. And that's when we strike, I said, publicly. They humiliated me at dinner. They told me I was nothing. I'm going to dismantle them in front of their audience. I called Agent Miller. I had met Agent Miller through a work contact years ago. He was with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Usually, they don't bother with family disputes, but the sheer volume of the identity theft, 500,000 plus, combined with the money laundering Brenda's notebook had uncovered involving the Russo syndicate, piqued his interest. "We verified the laundering claims," Miller told me over the phone. "Your brother has been funneling money for a very bad group of people. He's small fish, but he's sloppy fish. We're ready to move." "Can you do it tomorrow?" I asked. "Noon?" "It's a Sunday, Miss Vance. They're hosting a party. All the suspects will be in one place, and the BMW purchased with the fraudulent funds will be in the driveway. It's perfect for asset seizure." Miller paused. I could hear him typing. "We can make that work. We'll coordinate with the local PD." That night, my phone blew up with texts from my family. "Caleb, can't wait to deposit this. You're a lifesaver, sis. Maybe you're not totally useless after all." "Dad, don't be late tomorrow and wear something nice. Don't embarrass us like you did at the restaurant." "Mom, bring ice. We need lots of ice. And maybe some of those expensive napkins you like." I stared at the messages. The arrogance was blinding. They truly believed they had won. They thought they had successfully milked the cow one last time. They thought I was sitting at home, happy to be included. I replied to the group chat with one sentence: "I'll bring everything that's coming to you." I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my balcony watching the city lights. I thought about the little girl who just wanted her dad to be proud of her. I mourned her. She died at that restaurant table. The woman sitting on the balcony was a survivor. Sunday morning dawned bright and sunny. Perfect barbecue weather. I put on my best suit, not a party dress, a power suit. Navy blue, sharp shoulders, tailored fit. The kind of suit I wore when I was testifying in court as an expert witness. I pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I checked my bag. The deed, the signed confession, the copy of the credit report. I drove to the house. The street was lined with cars. Music was blasting, some generic pop hit. I could smell burgers grilling. I parked down the street. I wanted to walk up. I wanted to see the tableau before I shattered it. As I approached, I saw them. Richard was holding a beer, holding court with the neighbors near the grill. Caleb was leaning against the BMW, showing off his new watch to a group of men, gesturing wildly. Linda was fluttering around in a floral dress, playing the perfect hostess. They looked happy. They looked successful. It was the perfect lie, built on my credit and my silence. I walked up the driveway, the sound of my heels clicking on the pavement lost under the music. "Sarah," my mother called out, her smile tight, "you're late. And why are you wearing a suit? It's a barbecue. You look like you're going to a funeral." The music seemed to dip. People turned to look at me. "I'm not here for the barbecue, Mother," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the lawn. "What are you talking about?" Richard stepped forward, annoyed. "Where's the ice? I told you to bring ice." "I didn't bring ice," I said, stopping 10 feet from them. "I brought the truth." "Is she drunk?" Caleb laughed, looking at his friends. "Ignore her, guys. She's the dramatic one. Always needs attention." "Am I?" I pulled my phone out. I checked the time. 12 p.m. exactly. "It's noon, Caleb," I said. So I think your real guests are here." As if on cue, the heavy thud of car doors slamming shut echoed down the quiet suburban street. The chatter at the party died down. Heads turned. 3 large black SUVs had blocked the driveway, boxing in the stolen BMW and the guests' cars. A marked police cruiser pulled up behind them, lights flashing silently. My father frowned, squinting in the sun. "Who is this? Who's blocking the driveway?" He started marching down the lawn, his chest puffed out in indignant rage. "Hey, you can't park there. This is private property. I'm hosting an event." The doors of the SUVs opened. 6 people stepped out. They weren't wearing party clothes. They were wearing tactical vests and windbreakers with bold yellow letters on the back. FBI. Agent Miller was in the lead. He walked up the driveway with a purpose, his hand resting near his hip. 2 uniformed police officers flanked him. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Mrs. Higgins, the nosy neighbor from next door, dropped her plate of deviled eggs. The music was abruptly cut off by someone near the speaker. "Richard Vance?" Agent Miller asked, his voice calm but authoritative. "Yes?" My father's voice faltered. The bluster began to leak out of him. "What is this? Is this a joke? Caleb, did you hire actors?" "This is not a joke, sir," Miller said. He held up a folded document. "We have a federal warrant for the arrest of Caleb Vance for money laundering, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft, and a warrant for Richard and Linda Vance for conspiracy to commit fraud and identity theft." The silence that followed was absolute. You could hear the wind rustling the leaves in the oak trees. "What?" Linda screeched, dropping her spatula. "Fraud? We are upstanding citizens. This is a mistake. My son is a businessman." Caleb's face had gone the color of ash. He looked at the agents, then at the BMW, then at the fence. He took a step back. "Caleb Vance, stop right there," Miller commanded. 2 agents moved quickly, intercepting him before he could run. They grabbed his arms. "It's her!" Caleb screamed, his voice cracking. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "It's my sister. She's crazy. She's trying to frame us because she's jealous." Miller looked at me, then back at Caleb. "Actually, Mr. Vance, we have IP logs, bank records, and a confession signed by you yesterday acknowledging the fraudulent debts. Oh, and the notebook from your ex-wife, Brenda." Caleb's knees buckled. The fight went out of him. "Confession?" Richard sputtered. He turned to me, his eyes wide with a mix of confusion and betrayal. "The papers, the investment." "You said it was for taxes." "There was no investment, Dad," I said, stepping forward. I spoke calmly, addressing the whole lawn. "There was no bond. Those papers you signed admitted that you stole my identity to buy that car, that jewelry, and fund your lifestyle. You signed a confession." You snake?" Richard lunged at me. His face was purple. An officer stepped in between us, shoving my father back hard. "Sir, step back, put your hands behind your back." "Don't touch me. Do you know who I am?" Richard bellowed, struggling. "Yes," the officer said, spinning him around and snapping the handcuffs on. The metallic click echoed across the yard. "You're a suspect, under arrest." My mother began to wail. It was a theatrical, high-pitched sound. "Sarah, help us! Tell them!" "We're your family! You can't let them take us!" I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had guilt-tripped me for decades. "I can't help you, Mom," I said. "I'm the one who called them." The crowd gasped. The neighbors were whispering furiously. The humiliation my father had feared was happening, but it was 1,000 times worse than he could have imagined. But I wasn't done. "Get off my property!" Richard screamed as they dragged him toward the SUV. "Sarah, tell them, this is my house. I will sue all of you for trespassing." I walked closer to him. "Actually, Dad," I said, loud enough for Mrs. Higgins to hear every word, "that's the other thing." I reached into my bag and pulled out the deed, the original deed, stamped and notarized 10 years ago. "This isn't your house," I said. "It never was." "What?" He stopped struggling. "I bought this house with Grandma Rose's inheritance. The Rose Trust owns it. I am the sole trustee. You've lived here for 10 years as guests. You never paid rent. You never paid the mortgage. You just paid the light bill." "Liar," he spat. "We're the owners." "You're squatters," I corrected him. and thieves. I held up the paper they signed yesterday. And, per Clause 15C of the document you signed yesterday, without reading it, you agreed that any illegal activity on the premises results in immediate termination of your residency rights. I looked at Agent Miller. Agent, are they being arrested for crimes committed on this property? Yes, ma'am, Miller said, suppressing a smile. Wire fraud originated from this IP address. Then, I looked at my father. Consider this your eviction notice. You're not coming back here. My mother looked up, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. Sarah, how could you? We're your family. Where will we go? No, Mom, I said, feeling a tear finally roll down my cheek, not of sadness, but of release. You're not family. You're parasites. Family doesn't steal your identity. Family doesn't tell you nobody needs you while spending your money. I signaled to the officer standing near the power box on the side of the house. I had arranged this with the utility company earlier that morning. Cut it, I said. The officer flipped the main breaker. Ka-chunk. The house died. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. The lights in the windows went dark. The fountain in the garden sputtered and stopped. The power is in my name, I said, and I'm canceling the service today. Caleb was hauled up from the grass stains ruining his suit. He looked at me with pure hatred. I'll kill you, he mouthed. You'll have to make bail first, I replied, and since I froze the accounts you stole, good luck with that. They were dragged to the SUVs, my father shouting about his rights, my mother wailing about how she was a victim, Caleb silent and defeated. The cars drove away, lights flashing. I stood on the lawn. The guests were silent, staring at me with a mix of fear and awe. Party's over, I said, smoothing my jacket. Please clear the driveway. The aftermath wasn't quick. It was a long, slow grind of justice. The days following the raid were a blur of legal proceedings. Because they had signed the confession disguised as an investment contract, their defense lawyer, a cheap strip mall attorney because they couldn't afford anyone else, had almost nothing to work with. Elias was brilliant. He handed everything to the district attorney on a silver platter. I didn't have to visit them in jail. I didn't accept their collect calls. My phone showed dozens of blocked attempts from the county detention center. I went to the house, my house, one last time. I hired a cleaning crew to pack up their personal belongings. I didn't want to touch their things. Walking through the empty rooms was surreal. I saw the remnants of their illusion, the fake awards on the wall, the expensive clothes in the closet, tags still on, bought with stolen money. I found my old room. It was exactly as I had left it years ago, but filled with boxes of Caleb's junk. Old trophies, failed business plans, empty liquor bottles. They had turned my sanctuary into his storage unit. It hurt, but it was a distant pain, like pressing on a bruise that was already healing. I listed the house for sale the next week. The market was hot. It sold in 3 days to a nice young couple who had no idea about the drama that had unfolded on the lawn. The proceeds from the sale, plus the restitution ordered by the court, seizing Caleb's car, their jewelry, everything of value, paid off the fraudulent debts they had racked up in my name. The trial was short. Caleb took a plea deal. 5 years in federal prison for money laundering and fraud. Brenda testified against him. I heard she sat in the front row wearing a bright red dress, looking like retribution incarnate. My parents got lighter sentences due to their age, house arrest and 5 years of probation. But the real punishment was the loss of face. Their reputation was destroyed. The country club banned them. Their friends vanished. They were forced to move into a small, state-subsidized apartment 2 towns over. I heard my father works as a greeter at a hardware store now. I heard my mother cleans houses under the table. I sat in the courtroom for the sentencing. When the judge asked if I had a victim impact statement, I stood up. My father refused to look at me. My mother was weeping into a tissue, looking small and frail. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady, "for years, I was told that my value lay only in what I could provide. I was told that I wasn't needed. I learned the hard way that the only person who truly needs me is me. I don't ask for vengeance. I only ask that they are prevented from doing this to anyone else." I walked out of that courtroom and didn't look back. It's been 1 year since that day. I'm sitting on the deck of a small cottage. It's not a mansion, it's cozy, but it overlooks the ocean. I bought it with the money left over from selling the Oakwood house after the debts were cleared. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. The sound of the waves is the only music I need. Grandma Rose would have loved it here. I have her picture on the mantle. I hear a car pull up on the gravel drive. It's Brenda. She comes over every Sunday for brunch. We're not just allies anymore, we're actual friends. She's studying to be a paralegal. Elias hired her. She's brilliant at it. "Hey," she calls out, holding a bottle of champagne. "Guess who got her first raise?" "Congrats," I smile, taking the glasses she offers. My phone buzzes on the table. It's a blocked number. I know who it is. It's probably my mother, calling from a burner phone to beg for money or guilt-trip me. Or maybe it's my father, wanting to blame me for his arthritis. I look at the screen. In the past, my heart would have raced. I would have felt that pang of obligation. I would have answered. Today, I just feel the ocean breeze. I press the block button. I take a sip of champagne. The air smells like salt and freedom. "Who was that?" Brenda asks. "Nobody," I say, "just a wrong number." And I mean it. They are nobody to me now. I learned that blood doesn't make you family. Loyalty does. Respect does. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to cut the anchor that's dragging you down. They said nobody needs me. They were wrong. I needed me. And now I have everything I need. Looking back, I realized that the dinner at Les Jardins was the best thing that ever happened to me. If my father hadn't been so cruel, if he hadn't said those words, I might have kept enabling them forever. I might have let them drain me until I was a husk. Pain is a signal. It tells you something is wrong. For years, I ignored the signal. I took painkillers in the form of their fake affection. But when the pain became too sharp to ignore, it forced me to move. To anyone listening to this story who feels like the fixer in their family, to anyone who feels like an ATM machine or an emotional punching bag, check your credit report, check your boundaries, and most importantly, check your worth. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm, especially if those others are standing there holding buckets of water, watching you burn. It wasn't easy. There are nights I still miss the idea of having a mom and dad, but then I remember the peace I have now. I sleep through the night. My bank account is mine. My life is mine. And that is worth more than any fake approval they could ever give me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was heavy, but I hope it gave you some strength. If you made it this far, you are different from the rest. You have the patience and the depth to understand real struggles. Please, do me a huge favor. Comment the letter A below. Let me know you're one of the true ones who stuck around until the end. And if you have a story about a time you had to stand up for yourself, share it in the comments. I read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the next video on the screen to hear more stories about justice and resilience. Until next time, take care of yourselves. You are needed.